Hello everyone, I'm Crow77, and today we're taking a look at a topic that's a bit further from the table, so to speak, than typical. Cognitive biases that could be affecting your gameplay, and what we can do about them. I'm going to start with my situation, and why this is an important topic to me right now. Currently, on Tenho, I'm at a 6th Dan level. I'm still working to improve that, but as you can see, I've mostly leveled off for the past 100 games or so. The left side of this chart is what a player still on the path to ranking up would look like. It shows rapid improvement in rank with very few flat sections. Fairly consistent progress overall, likely indicative that a player is playing below their skill level in the ranks. The right side, though, is more what you'd expect to see once a player has hit a plateau. If your progress is still on the left side of this chart, then you're doing just fine. Keep playing games as normal, leveling out that rank probably should, in my opinion, be your primary focus. One of the best ways to improve at Mahjong is by playing people who are as good as or better than you, which we typically won't do if we're still steadily rising in the ranks. Reading articles or watching strategy videos is still important at this stage, but really focus on getting that ranking up so we can get a better level of competition going. But let's talk about the right side of the graph. Many times if a player gets stuck, especially at a lower rank, it's because of a cognitive bias that they have. A cognitive bias is a systematic pattern of deviation from the norm or rationality in judgment. Using that sort of deviation, individuals then create their own subjective reality, so to speak, from their perception of the input. This presents itself in a few different ways in Mahjong, both at the table and away from it, and it can be a significant roadblock to improving. I could go in depth to all the different types of biases from a scientific level, but instead I'd like to focus on a couple examples that I've encountered recently. The first one is something that we hear all the time. My luck has been horrible recently. Now we hear this in Mahjong chat rooms, talking with friends, pretty much everywhere. And honestly, given that Mahjong has a pretty high amount of luck involved, it's kind of to be expected. We all go on unlucky streaks sometimes. But how can you be sure you were just unlucky? One of the most important things to do to avoid this bias is to have some kind of independent verification. There are many ways to do this, but one of the best, in my opinion, is to have a friend or coach look over a couple games. There have been a couple times over the course of my Tenho career, so to speak, that I've needed to stop and remove myself from that situation and have a friend look at some games for me, and having tried and failed to do so myself. Sometimes they agreed that it was just an unlucky game, but more often than not, they're able to provide feedback for improvement. And overall, if you raise your standard to a higher level, the times you'll get unlucky will either be less detrimental to you or less frequent as you learn to deal with them. So the most important thing at the end of the day is to use it to your bad luck to figure out how to improve your game, rather than just casting it aside and chalking it up as an outlier, especially if it's something that's happening more frequently than an outlier typically would. The next one I'd like to call, this discard may have been wrong, but it worked out. I hear this all the time, and honestly it's a very dangerous fallacy, because at the end of the day, Mahjong is a game firmly rooted in statistics. If you're working on reviewing your games, or even other people's games to find potential issues, refrain from taking on this mindset. Instead, treat each discard as though nothing comes after it. Nothing else matters except for the discard at hand. Each play should be made such that you maximize any potential value coming from it, regardless of what actually comes through in the game. By looking at it this way, you're preparing to improve the long-term expected value of your play. Sometimes making the correct decision will involve still dealing into a hand or something like that, but that doesn't mean that the long-term value isn't there. And the last one I want to go over at the moment is that it's going bad for me, so it's my turn to win. Now, it's kind of a weird word in there, but I see it a lot, and it presents itself in a couple different ways. The basic premise is that because they have a few losses in a row, the player thinks it's their quote-unquote turn to win. The first way this comes up is that a player's behind in a game, maybe in South 2 or so, to the point where they need to sculpt a big hand to win. However, because they're tired of losing, they make a quick hand, even though 1,000 or 2,000 points isn't going to make a difference with the position that they're in. To fight this one, adopting a mindset of positional play that seems to help out a lot. Instead of just saying, I'm tired of losing, look at it as, what do I need to do to win here? If that 1,000-point hand won't help you, then what can you do to make a bigger win? Do you need to draw more Dora? Do you need to slow down instead of opening up your hand so you can reach? Identifying the path to victory is very key in this sort of situation. The other way this comes up is over-aggression. Sometimes players see their opponents taking early reaches all game, and they think that might be what they need to do to win. And promptly they'll try to declare a reach on a 3-5 conch on weight or something like that, maybe with only medium of value. Just because you're losing to fast hands doesn't necessarily mean that you should force your hands into bad position to make them quicker. That can easily backfire at best by wasting the 1,000 points that you just spent on the Riichi, and at worst, dealing into even larger hands and putting yourself in a worse situation. This side of it's a little bit harder to counteract. If you see yourself starting to think like this, you need to remember back to the basic hand building, honestly. If you wouldn't reach if things hadn't been going this way in this game, you really need to question it hard before you reach when they have been going like this. So, as far as I go, I fell into this horrible luck bias for quite a bit with my recent games. As I mentioned, I probably did have some bad luck for some games, but I took it for granted that I could keep progressing as it is. Because of this, I stopped trying to improve my gameplay at all. After identifying that, I started working on some methods that used to be too advanced for me to carry out and starting to try to incorporate them in my gameplay. What's important to remember at this point, though, is that when you're taking this kind of step to improve, you can expect to lose rank before you gain it. An important point to remember, though, Mahjong theory takes practice to put into effect. So when you adopt a new rule, you'll likely apply it too rigidly or in the wrong situations at first. If you see that initial drop in your rank, don't give up. There's a famous cliche that you might have heard before. Learn the rules like a pro so that you can break them like an artist. Like I said, it's a pretty interesting cliche, but right now that's the step that I'm on. And while I'm not a pro by any means, I'm still working on becoming that artist. As always, thank you for watching. If you have any feedback, questions, or topic ideas, please leave a comment below or email me at this email address. Have a good one.